Morning. We are going to be reading from chapter 3 of The Mystical Marriage and reading a text on love from Maximus the Confessor about demons, which is going to be fun. And when demons tempt us and where demons tempt us, which is something that I would highly recommend knowing, I guess, if that's happening. But it's an interesting section because it's placed between two sections, one about self-love, which is the last little section that we covered, in which Maximus and Elder Emilianos targeted self-love as the only thing that a human being needs to be vigilant about, right? And then he's going to talk about this idea of demons tempting us and where and how, through what means. But then the next text on love is about loving everybody equally, which is pretty interesting because it's kind of it kind of places everyone in a spot between themselves and the neighbor and the people that they're encountering, which is interesting because Maximus also is going to refer to the people that they're encountering as the place where demons tempt us. So anyway, all very interesting. So here is the text on love, followed by the reflection. Either the demons tempt us themselves, or they arm those who do not fear the Lord against us. They tempt us themselves when we are alone, away from others, just as they tempted the Lord in the desert. They tempt us through others when we associate with them, as they tempted the Lord through the Pharisees. It is for us to look to our examples and beat them back on both fronts. Here's the reflection. How do the demons tempt us? Either directly by themselves or indirectly through other human beings. It is important that we know when it is the former or the latter that we are experiencing. The demons themselves tempt us when we are alone, just as they tempted the Lord in the desert. It is when I am alone by myself the devil comes to tempt me, because there is no one else around me. There's an ancient tradition that when someone went into the desert, he went there to fight with the devil. In the same way, monastic life itself has long been seen as an intense, protracted struggle against the evil one. When, on the other hand, I live with others, the devil comes to tempt me through those around me, just as the Pharisees did and tried the Lord. In this way, the devil tempts those living in the world through other people, either through personal attacks, false accusation, treachery, and deceit, to mention only a few. For the most part, the greatest spiritual problem facing those living in the world is other people. If then I am living in the world together with other people, I must be prepared in order not to be bothered or troubled by them. If I have the right attitude, the right frame of mind with respect to them, I will be able to live a life free of temptations and remain untroubled by what goes on around me. This is why it is necessary to know what we are dealing with and how to prepare ourselves for it. There are people, including monks, who think that the devil is harassing them. As a rule, these people are arrogant and conceited, or they might have a psychological or mental problem, or overactive imaginations, or are simply deluded. The devil does not bother a man or a woman living in the world, living amongst other human beings, or living amongst monastic brothers and sisters. This only happens when such a person separates himself from society and undertakes to live alone with God. Since it is a given, then, that I will have social interactions with others, I must remain completely unaffected or undisturbed with troubles that will inevitably arise from these interactions. I need to dispose myself in such a way as to be ready to experience anything and everything from them: difficulties, hardships, stress, temptations, and more. At the same time, I have set aside all of my passions, or at least not act on them so that they not disturb or create additional problems. If I choose a path other than this one, I will not be able to have a spiritual life. Someone else may say hurtful things to me, hurt me physically, and inflict a host of bad things upon me. but he can never actually harm me if I maintain the right attitude towards him and to the larger situation. But from the moment I forget or fail to understand the devil's trap, which he has baited with the love or hate I harbor for someone else, with my feelings of attraction or repulsion, triggered either by a smile or a bitter word, you can see what insecure and treacherous ground I am on. Who then does the evil one attack directly? Those who are alone. As we said a moment ago, the sense of alone here is to be by oneself, but there's another meaning operative here, which is to be alone or live alone, not in isolation, but for the sake of someone else. Being alone in this way is a personal encounter of two, is when you would like to discuss something personal with someone and the two of you go somewhere where you can be alone. But the relationship we're talking about here is not a social encounter in which two people get together and talk about something. Instead, the other person in this case is someone to whom I belong, someone who I worship, I mean God, to whom I stand in relationship of servant. In addition, this person is the very purpose and goal of my life. He is my fulfillment. I give myself to him. I live alone exclusively with him because only in his person can I be fulfilled and made complete. Just as in the case of the married couple for whom there is no room nor any need of a third party, or their own two constitute one person, one flesh. To be alone then means to be alone with someone else toward whom I look and for whom I live and who is everything for me. Thus, when we talk about monasticism or about being alone when we pray either in one's cell or in the desert, it is not in any sense any kind of narrow psychological isolation or disconnection, but rather being alone with God. And it is from this perspective that we need to understand our struggle with the evil one. For me, to become a monk means that I let go of all preoccupations, all activities, all distractions, so that nothing exists but me and God. This is because God does not deign to visit souls and unite himself to them when they are not alone in this way, when they are still, as it says, be still and know that I am God. Without this kind of practice, there can be no real knowledge of God, no true word of theology, because the word will not reveal God to me. But when I make this practice mine and place myself in the presence of God, then I begin to walk on the path of truth leading to God. Then I begin to live a life in which I see God before me, and only then do I have any right to call myself a monk. And it is on this point that the evil one will try to make himself my God, and he will try to do this any way he can, hiddenly, openly, through seduction, cunning, or fear. It is for us to look to our example and beat them back on both fronts. What does Maximus mean here by example? In ordinary language, it means type or something of a characteristic. As a person, we say he's an extroverted type or he has melancholy character, but this is not exactly what Maximus means. Here, the word type needs to be taken in more of a literal sense, that is, as the outcome or result of the act of striking out of a form or shape, and in particular, the result of what has been formed and shaped in a struggle with one's adversaries. We speak, for example, of all the types of nails on the Lord's body, a word which refers to the marks made by the nails, the wounds imprinted on his body from the striking force of the nail. The sound of my feet walking on the marble floor is a kind of type that is marked out, an acoustic form produced by the striking of my feet. A sketch or a drawing is also a type. Letters, too, as those punched out by a typewriter, are also types, which is why we have the word like typography. A bas-relief, carving, is also a type that has been produced through similar activity or stone on wood. A seal and the mark or image left by the seal are types. Thus, a type is the means or agent that produces a result through the process of striking or imprinting against something else, having direct and immediate contact with, which serves as the physical medium for the result or the outcome. Since then a type is the outcome or the activity or marking or striking, we can say that the experience of our life is essentially a type, by which I mean it is the result of all the marks and blows and all the factors and influences that have shaped our lives. A person whose spiritual life has not been challenged in this way, who has not endured various blows, will be an immature person, an atypical person, who can have no certainty about his future. Only the one who has gone through this process can have the kind of certainty, because he has the experience and knows where he is going and how to move forward. But a person who has experienced no hardships or adversities in his life, who has never known sorrow or pain, who has never learned to endure the blows of life, whether inflicted by demons or other human beings or simply by itself, can never have a full and meaningful life. Let us consider more closely the type we are most familiar with and the kinds of experiences we have and how we have been shaped and formed by them. Yesterday, for example, I was a little upset because you gave me a rather rude look. The day before, I was troubled because you had forgotten about me. What type of person am I? Clearly, I am someone who is not alone with God, but who spends most of my time involved in the personal affairs of other human beings. I live as a mere mortal creature, just like everyone else, even if I am a monk, even if I have been wearing these monastic garments for years. If, on the other hand, my experience were purely spiritual, inward, resulting from the struggle of my ego with God, either struggles that my ego won and God lost, or struggles that I lost and God won, which has resulted in my fall, but in my spiritual ascent, then I am a type of person who is alone with God, who lives solely for God. If someone pays attention to himself, he will see whether he lives with God or merely with other people. Consider the type of person you are, and you will understand from which side you need to protect yourself. If Satan is troubling you, arm yourself properly, and above all things, be guarded against self-love. If it is other people who trouble you, place yourself spiritually out of reach of harmful contact with them, because they will be around you always, constantly subjecting you to temptations and trials, and leaving you covered with marks deeply shaped and changed by their imprinting impressions. Yet do not think that in your social interactions with others, you cannot always be with God. It would be a great mistake to think this. By virtue of these relations, and especially those marked by love and by service of the ministry of the church, you cannot be without God. You cannot offer yourself to the world if you yourself are not living in God, because the world wants God, not us. So the next text on love is about loving some people and hating some people, which is interesting coming off what was just read. So I'm going to give you actually the next two chapters on love for Maximus, and then we'll share the reflections of each next time. If you hate some people, and some you neither love nor hate, while others you only love moderately, and still others you love very much, know from this inequality that you are far from perfect love, which lays down that you must love everyone equally. Those who tempt us with God's permission either arouse the lusts of our soul, or stir up our anger, or darken our reason, or inflict pain on our body, or plunder our material goods. Okay, have a good day.